Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Empowered Women Now. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with your lovely host, Tara Weir. Hello, Tara.
Hi, Chris.
I now have to ask, last episode, the first episode, I talked about that I was the elephant in the room because I'm a dude talking on an Empowering Women podcast. But the thing that I like about that is that you and I are blending voices, male and female voices, in a conversation around empowering women. I think that's important to make that bridge for people. So, Anyway, well, this episode, we're actually starting to talk about how do women grow in their career? Because I think one of the challenges, well, you tell me, but I've heard enough of it over the years where there's a real challenge for women going where they want to go in their career. So I'm curious your perspective on why that is. What are the hurdles? What gets in the way? All that.
You know, what I've heard and what I've experienced is that we could be at a table or we could be standing in a circle talking with people, and often the male voice might say one thing and it might be a real summary of what a female had said, and they're congratulated for that as their idea. Or, for example, if we're sitting at a table and we're talking about a topic, often the facilitator or the leader of the group will reinforce and support less the female voice and more the male voice.
Right. Right.
So,
yeah. And we talked about, like in the last episode, we talked about some of the cultural things that just, culturally over history, like that's just sort of how it's been. And I think we're trying to shed that skin. We're trying to grow into what's next for us as in humanity.
Yes.
But we're still bumping up against some of the cultural norms that we've grown up in.
Absolutely.
So what's the answer? Like, how do we do that? How do women, and when I say we, I'm just going to forever, when I say we, I'm just going to forever mean women. How do we grow past those cultural norms?
Well, I think it's both an inside job and how we show up. So it's really about identifying how are we holding ourselves back? What language are we using that is minimizing our message? What verbal language? What words and phrases actually are diminishing our point and that are discrediting ourselves? What body language are we using? How are we showing up at the table physically that is communicating weakness or communicating self-doubt that we don't even realize we're doing? That we are making a statement non-verbally that is being heard loud and clear, even though we want to be heard in a different way. Yeah. So I believe it's the beginning piece is the awareness. It's the saying, okay, well, how am I, when I'm showing up, what are my thoughts about this situation? There could be underlying subconscious thoughts that we're not even aware of that are really like, I'm not enough, or fears around saying the wrong thing, or whatever their thoughts are, we may not be aware of, but they are definitely showing up through how our body is communicating and often through our words.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
so good.
Starting with that awareness and then taking a look at that, learning about that, making choices once we're aware of that, making choices around that, and then being able to show up in an effective way. Because I think culturally, a lot of women, there's phrases and certain postures that we as women take on, not necessarily consciously, we take it on, and that's how we show up. And then we don't understand why we're not being respected or being listened to. And there's certain ways we're showing up that's creating that.
Right. So let's make it specific, because I'm trying to picture what that looks like. I'm not a woman, so I don't know how that is for you. So tell me, or give me some of your own experiences, what does it look like, or how does it happen? What are the voices saying in my head when I show up not empowered? And then how do we shift that so we do show up specifically empowered in a situation?
So the voices that are often that I still notice and have to work with or manage at times, not it used to be 80% they were there and 20% I was feeling empowered. Now I'm more of like 80%, maybe 90%, you know? So,
feeling empowered.
Feeling empowered. Yeah. And
nice.
being able to speak up and to fight the urge to be agreeable, to keep the peace and to be likable, but to actually show up in a way that allows me to stay connected to people.
Yeah. That piece right there. Like, is the being agreeable thing, is that a woman thing or is that a personality thing? What is that piece?
That's really been discovered to be a woman thing, that there is an expectation for women to be likable, and we're expected to be nurturing. We're expected to be a good listener. And those are strengths, and goodness, I pray those for the world, right? So that's an incredible set of skills that women generally have. But I think that it can overpower our voice. And we can, when we really do need to say something or we want to share our ideas, that agreeability or that fear of not being enough, or those are two biggies for sure that hold us back.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I feel like sometimes if you have enough gumption in the moment, you'll recognize that you're like, I can't do this anymore, but the opposite actually comes out. So rather than being constructive in how you try to be heard, you come out and you try to steamroll, and then you're met with resistance. I would guess that happens. Does that happen? Do you feel like?
Oh, that's where I started. Oh my gosh.
Is that right?
It was like speaking of the elephant, I was the bull in the china shop. When I first started to try to really communicate, I went from holding myself back and really tentative and afraid to here I am. You know, listen to me.
Right.
And I can tell you that wasn't effective either. And so I really had to learn and do some internal growth around what I believed to show up in an effective way, because it isn't going to serve anybody. It doesn't serve anyone when I'm either not saying anything or I'm charging through in a aggressive way that doesn't honor and respect everyone at the table that is a part of the conversation.
Do you find, is that a necessary experience to go through in order to get to the middle ground? Like, do you have to kind of swing from one side of the spectrum to the other to kind of feel what that feels like and then like even out, or are there ways we can?
Both, I would say, is true. For some people, they might need to. I truly believe that if I had a coach and a mentor, I don't think it would have been quite as a bumpy of a road. Because I think that I was onto something. Like, I knew I had something to say. I wanted to share. I wanted to be present, and I was onto something. I just didn't know how to do it in a way that served me and served the group. I for those of you listening to this right now, like that moment, some of you know right now, you're like, I have something to say. I want to say something, and you don't know how to do it. And I feel like, Tara, this is what is so great about what you actually do with your business, right? Like Powerful Connections Now, like when you come speak to groups, how many of you listening to this are either in a corporate setting, you have a team, you own a team, you're in a space where what you want is for your people or your team to constructively bring their best ideas to the table so the business grows. And in order for that to happen, people have to feel like there's a effective way for their voice to come out. And I feel like, Tara, this is what you get to do when you come speak to groups. Yes.
Like this is what you help facilitate. By you speaking to the group now has that conversation to play with and talk about with each other. Or if you do teamwork, I know you do teamwork with corporations, you'll come in and actually work with teams and workshops. But I just feel like there's a lot of people, you included, listening to this, and the teams around you that say, I have something to say. I just don't know how to get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that your point that there's a leader or somebody that owns a team, but often it's the people at the table that aren't the leader, the informal leaders, but they're the ones that are holding back. And so there's so much impact and influence we can have no matter what seat we're sitting in, but it's saying, how can I do this effectively to make a difference?
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like I was thinking about, like, as the leader, I'm curious your perspective on this. As the leader, how do I encourage my team around the table to speak up and to kind of come out more with their ideas.
Yeah. What I would encourage people to do as a leader is to just begin to become very aware. Be aware of how often people are speaking up. Be aware of who's speaking up first. Be aware if, as a leader, if you're facilitating a conversation, start paying attention to, am I reflecting back to a man what I heard from them, but I'm not doing that for a woman? Am I really valuing all the voices at the table? Are the women tending to hold back? How regular or frequently are they speaking up? And then I would encourage them to coach women on their team, and just on a one-on-one, I wouldn't do it in the group, but start with one-on-one to say, you know, I'm interested in this and I want to see where are you at with this, and have them share with the leader their own evaluation of where they're at with that, and then set goals around it with their leader.
Yeah.
So
I feel like in part of this, if I were the leader and as a man, and I had women that I would notice hadn't spoken up, but I knew they were brilliant. I knew they were bright, smart, intelligent, but they're not sharing as much. I almost feel like I'd rather have someone like you have that conversation with them to pull that out of them than if, I don't know, it almost feels a little awkward for me to come in and say, let me coach you on how to be more empowered as a woman.
I think it depends on the leader and it depends on the relationship.
Okay.
I think that there's a certain amount of trust that has to be there in order to develop goals around this kind of thing. And not every person is going to speak all the time, because not everybody's an extrovert or introverts.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's important.
You know, so it's not to say that everyone has to speak up. It's just like what you were saying. It's like, I know they're brilliant. I know they have something to say or share. And if that opportunity in that conversation is where they're going to contribute to the development of whatever is happening at that table, then that's when they need to learn how to speak it.
Yeah. This is the part that feels like is so slippery with these cultural norms. Like, it's the stuff where like, I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're an introvert, maybe they're an extrovert. Do I talk to them about, everything starts to get very sensitive and touchy when we start talking about, is this a women issue? And as a man, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to be like, excuse me, like, is this a women issue? Like, like a, do you feel disempowered as a woman? And now it's like, as a man, I can tell you that's a very uncomfortable conversation to have. And so then what we end up doing collectively, men and women, is we don't talk about it.
Right. And what I'm saying is, and why we're here on the show is like, let's talk about it. And not categorize it as a gender issue or as a personality issue. Let's just talk about it. Like, you know, be authentic as a leader. We were talking about this subject A, and I knew based on our conversations that you had some really valuable input that you could have included in that conversation that could have really helped our team move forward. And I want to see your best. So how can I support you in bringing your best in all conversations? Now, let's talk about what might be holding you back. And that can be a conversation that just opens up possibilities. So that to me is, that's why it's not really like, in my mind, it's a gender issue, but it's really a human issue. But I want to be aware of the fact that women culturally don't tend to.
Yeah, that's what clicked for me just then, was that it's what you've always said is like, the solution is an internal solution. Like when you, the person in your own skin, starts to own your life, your actions, your value, your, like, all of you.
Take responsibility for how you're showing up. And that's
a human thing. That's not a man or a woman thing. That's a human thing. And that is bumping up against some of the cultural history we have.
Yes.
But the answer isn't in a man-woman answer. It's in a you owning your power answer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I could bring this whole skill set and I could talk to mixed groups. I could talk to men and it would probably resonate with them on some level in some way. But I think that because of women and science that shows, because of the hormones that we have going on, because of there are gender differences that this taps into them in a different place, and they can resonate with it more. But it is a human we all want to be our best. We all want to be able to speak up. We all want to be a part of the conversation and contribute to the best.
I mean, we've labeled this episode like, how women can speak up and be heard to grow in their career. And I feel like where we're coming to and what we're sort of saying here is that in order for you to grow in your career, you have to speak up. And when you speak up in a place that comes from not like I'm my pendulum swinging to the other side,
right?
But I'm speaking up from a place of I value what I have to say, and I think I'm seeing something a very specific way, and I want to say that. That's how we actually get to be heard, and that's how we grow in our career. Because who doesn't want contributing members of the team to keep sharing? And when you keep sharing valuable stuff, we want to find more ways for you to thrive inside this growing company.
Absolutely. That's definitely it.
Yeah. I love that. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. If we were wrapping this up and I said, well, how do people, what is a great way to start to begin facilitating this conversation? Like, I think it's important for people to start talking about it so that we all gravitate towards that conversation, that change. What's the best way to do that?
Best way to begin the conversation. Truthfully, I honestly believe we need to start with looking within. That I encourage every woman to start paying attention to what are my thoughts when I'm approaching a meeting, or if they say, hey, we need someone to present this to the other department. Am I leaning into that, to quote Sheryl, Sandberg? Am I going to step up for that? Or am I hesitating like, oh, no, I don't think I want to talk about that. Just start paying attention to our thoughts and what are we willing to do and step up for, and what are we not? And then and maybe the awareness, when I work with my clients, we talk about the 3 portals to awareness. One of them is thoughts. So becoming aware of my thoughts. One of them is feelings, and one of them is body sensations. So for example, sometimes if I know I'm going to have a stressful conversation, particularly with my teenage daughter, I tend to notice I get really stressed and tense in my right shoulder. So I'm like, okay, I'm noticing that sometimes my sensations are the portal into my awareness. So I say, okay, that pain is going on. So what are my thoughts? Well, my thoughts are, she's going to blow up at me because she's very reactive. And my feelings are of fear or anxiety. So all of those pieces influence how I present or how I am present in the moment or not present in the moment. So my encouragement is to say, just start noticing for ourselves, and then also pay attention to how are other women showing up. You get a sense that they're speaking from their power and their voice, and just start noticing. I think just start noticing.
I love this because this is the kind of work you facilitate for teams and you talk about and walk people through in your presentations, when you speak, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I also think another great place for that, if you want to explore this further with your team and bring Tara into your association, your company, your organization, to just get the conversation started. I think such a smart way to do this is to bring somebody like Tara in for that. Tara, people want to reach out to you for speaking or group work. Like how can they reach you?
They can contact me through my website, which is powerfulconnectionsnow.com. And there's a tab there for let's start a conversation. So let's do that.
Yeah, so good. Thank you for the show, and thank you for what you're doing, your important work in the world. Can't wait for our future episodes. And until then, take care.
Thank you. You too.